Yeah, so I know I'm standing between you and breakfast, so I'll be quick. But so the main thing is that we always think of MR safety in terms of not harming the patient, but we forget that often patients can actually undergo the scan, and we often refuse the scan which the patient needs for a diagnosis or for treatment because we worry too much about safety. So this talk is more on the fact that almost all patients can undergo a safe MRI despite pregnancy, despite lactation, except for certain specific points, and so that we can ensure that everyone who deserves a scan and is safe can be safely scanned does get actually scanned. So here are some questions. For example, this is a healthy man with headache and needs a contrast enhanced MRI. Do you actually need a creatinine study in all cases? And these are the options. Just think about it in your mind. What would you do if the patient comes, he doesn't have a serum creatinine? What would you do? Here's another patient. Now the EGFR is low. The EGFR, we have a creatinine, it's 25. The patient has brain tumor. Would you give contrast? Would you perform a contrast MRI or not? So these are all practical questions which we all face, and often we end up doing the wrong thing. So of course in Tata, we know how to treat brain tumors and what to do, but across India, we often see patients being refused scans in such situations. And in another similar case, a pregnant lady this time who needs a contrast MRI, what do we do? So hopefully at the end of the talk, we'll be able to answer these questions. So when it comes to gadolinium contrast agents, you can sort of classify them into two ways. And this is important for us to understand what is safe and what is not safe. One is, hepatocyte agents, which get excreted also by the liver. So Eovis, which we don't have in India, and Multihance, around 5% of it gets excreted by the liver, 95% by the kidneys. And all the extracellular agents, which is everything else, all of it gets excreted by the kidneys. But so what happens is, if the kidney is not working, this becomes a relatively safe agent, because if the liver is working, then you can still administer this contrast to that patient, right? And this is the other classification. This is the chemical structure classification, and most of us are aware of it. So there are the linear gadolinium agents and macrocyclic gadolinium agents. And usually the rule of the thumb for anything in chemistry, if there's a ring structure, which is what the cyclic structure is, it is more stable than anything which is linear. So macrocyclic agents are more stable than linear agents. And even amongst the linear agents, there are some exceptions. So the ionic agents, Magnavis, Multihance, Eovis, are more stable than the non-ionic agents. So as far as stability is concerned, macrocyclic is the most stable. So again, the safest, followed by ionic linear agents, or some of the ionic linear agents. I would say these two because they also get excreted by the liver. And then the non-ionic ones are the least safe or least stable, I would say. Okay. Yeah. So what are the things we worry about when it comes to contrast and safety in MRI? So allergic reactions and extravasation very uncommon and something we don't really need to worry too much about. The only thing is, if the patient has a history of prior allergic reaction to a gadolinium agent, just change the agent. And usually linear agents are less allergogenic. So they are safer compared to the cyclic agents when it comes to allergies. So that's probably the only place where linear is safer than macrocyclic. Everywhere else, macrocyclics are more stable and hence safer. So, but this is the two main things, right? NSF and GAD deposition in the brain. So NSF, we realized that there is this entity called NSF in the early 2000s. And what happens is, all gadolinium or elemental gadolinium, what is just the gadolinium ion, is toxic to the body, but which is why we always chelate it. We never give gadolinium directly. It's always gado, with a chelate. So gadominate, dimeglomin, right? So there's a chelate. It's not just gadolinium alone. And that chelate keeps it stable and ensures that it doesn't deposit in the body. And because gadolinium gets excreted easily by the kidney, we have nothing to worry. But in patients with CKD, patients with kidney failure, the gadolinium does not get excreted, and then it gets retained in the body for a long time. And in these cases, when the gadolinium is not very stable, the linear forms, they sort of start dechelating, and elemental gadolinium gets deposited in the tissues, and that's what causes NSF. So obviously, more stable agents like macrocyclics have a very, very low chance of causing NSF. The less stable linear agents have a higher chance of causing NSF. Right? So who is the patient who is at risk for NSF? Only patients who have really bad kidney function. So anyone on dialysis, anyone with severe CKD, EGFR less than 30, or anyone with an acute kidney injury, any acute renal failure is again at risk. right? So what do we generally do? Anyone with EGFR greater than 30, we should give full dose contrast. Anyone with acute renal failure, anyone on dialysis, anyone with EGFR less than 30, we always try to avoid contrast administration. But again, the point is not it's contraindicated. We should try and avoid it. The main thing is you have to answer the clinical question. So we prefer doing a non-contrast MRI or sometimes even a contrast CT over a contrast MRI. But if there's no other option, if it's a, for example, it's a brain tumor, then a CT is not enough. And then you just talk with the referring physician, and after consent, we can actually still go ahead and do the study. Why? Because the macrocyclics now we know are very safe. It's the linear which are responsible for NSF, right? So what is the risk stratification? As far as the American College of Radiology is concerned, is the simplest classification. Remember, there's group 1, which is these 3 agents, Omniscan, Optimark, Magnavis. They have cases of NSF reported. So anyone with EGFR less than 30, you will not give these 3. But when it comes to the group 2, which is all the macrocyclics and multi-hands, which has liver excretion as well, they do not actually have a single case of NSF reported. So many patients have been given these agents despite renal failure, and they have not caused NSF. So if the patient really needs a contrast study, first you have to be sure, okay, should we give a contrast study or can we answer the question without contrast? But if you really need to do a contrast study, then you can go ahead and do it, but you should always do it preferably with the macrocyclics. Okay, and this is a recent agent. We anyway don't have it in India. So we don't have enough data on this. So that's called group 3. Okay, in fact, what does ACR say? The risk of NSF with group 2 is so low that you don't even need a creatinine value in these patients, irrespective of the age of the patient, irrespective of the history of the patient. If you're using a group 2 agent, any of the macrocyclics or multi-hands, what does ACR say? Don't do a serum creatinine, don't do an EGFR, just go ahead and give the contrast. Okay, so for type 2 agents, don't need to perform the serum creatinine. If it's a type 1 agent that we are using, anyone is generally healthy and young, we don't really have to do a creatinine across all patients. Only patients' history of hypertension, diabetes, or renal disease is when we do a creatinine on a EGFR. Of course, in Tata, we do it in everyone simply because patients have been given nephrotoxic drugs during chemotherapy. So here we prefer to have a EGFR value. But generally, if it's a hale and healthy patient, relatively healthy patient, no chronic disease, we can even do it without a creatinine value. And if there's any doubt, of course, you do the EGFR and then you go ahead and give the contrast. Right. So when it comes to this, a patient with headache, if you want to do a contrast enhanced MRI, you can certainly do it. And if you're using a type 2 agent, you really don't need any EGFR or anything. The only time you need EGFR if the patient has history of some renal disease or hypertension or diabetes. Okay, and again with a patient of brain tumor, we know that we cannot assess brain tumors without a contrast enhanced MRI. Then we should perform it, and you should use a macrocyclic agent, right? So that's the take-home point when it comes to contrast. And sometimes they ask that the patient had a contrast study yesterday, but we need another study today. Can we do it? And yes, you can do it as long as the kidney function is good. Anything after 4-hour gap is fine. If the kidney function is bad, then ideally a 7-day gap. But again, everything is based on the clinical need of the patient. If you really need to do the study, you will go ahead and do it with a macrocyclic agent. Okay, for a patient on dialysis, preferably we avoid a contrast enhanced MRI. We prefer a contrast enhanced CT. But again, as I said, everything is can we answer the question which is there. If we cannot answer the question, the patient really needs a contrast MRI, then we go ahead and do a macrocyclic study, use a small dose, and ideally the patient needs to be given the contrast close to the next hemodialysis session. And that's pretty much what you should remember. Right. So now we also know that some gadolinium does deposit in the brain. So, for example, here's a patient after multiple, so like 5-6 contrast enhanced MR examination, you can see that the signal intensity in the nuclei has increased, right? So, and that's because this is all gadolinium, which slowly deposits in very, very minimal quantities in the brain over multiple contrast injections. And this can happen even in patients with normal renal function. So these are not patients with CKD. These are patients with normal renal function, but you do repeated contrast studies, which often happens in patients with tumors, patients with multiple sclerosis. So then we should try and, use the safest agent possible, right? So that we avoid this. Does this really harm the patient? What we know is that it deposits, yes. We know that it deposits even if the kidney function is normal. We know that because macrocyclics are more stable agents, it's less likely to happen with macrocyclic agents. But does it really harm the patient? Till now, whatever data we have, we don't see any harm to the patient. So this is more something we have caught on MRI, but really doesn't harm the patient. But what should we do in such a situation, right? So what does America say? America says you can use whatever agent, linear agent, macrocyclic agent. What does Europe say? Europe actually banned all linear agents. So Europe said use only macrocyclic agents. You will use linear agents only for hepatocyte studies because for that there is no macrocyclic agent available. Japan also pretty much banned all linear agents. They said use only macrocyclics unless it's a hepatocyte specific study. In India, of course, we haven't banned anything. But most of us have started using more and more macrocyclics, particularly in younger patients, pediatric and young age patients, and in patients who we know will need multiple contrast enhanced MRIs. So, that's probably what it will eventually lead to. But as of now, there is no proof of clinical harm. Okay. So that's about gadolinium deposition. Now let's come to pregnancy. What are the concerns? I think Amit has spoken about it in much detail. So you won't go into details of all of this, but there are some concerns that the MRI heating effects may cause some damage to the fetus. The acoustic noise may damage the fetal ears. But over 20-25 years of MRI, and we really haven't had any proven case of MRI causing harm. So there is nothing to really worry about a non-contrast MRI and pregnancy. We can safely go ahead and do a non-contrast MRI and pregnancy, irrespective of whichever trimester, first trimester, second trimester, third trimester, we can do it. And that's what, this is the ACR document, and that's what even ACOG says, the gynecology, the Obstetric and Gynecology Association. So we can always go ahead and do an MRI whenever, of course, it is necessary. So the main question again is it really needed, and will it help the patient? If it helps the patient, we can go ahead and do a non-contrast MRI. Initially, most studies were on the 1.5 Tesla. So most papers said, let's do it on the 1.5 Tesla MRI. 3 Tesla, of course, will have more effects on the fetus. So that's what initially was the dictum. But now we have enough data to say that even 3 Tesla is okay. So of course, if you have both machines with you, you will prefer a 1.5 Tesla. But you have only a 3 Tesla with your patient who's pregnant comes, you can safely do the MRI on a 3 Tesla machine also. But what about contrast, right? So again, the issue is the same here. When you give gadolinium, everything gets excreted into the kidneys. But whatever goes into the amniotic fluid, whatever goes inside the uterus, into the amniotic cavity of the fetus, that doesn't get excreted. That remains indefinitely. It keeps circulating in the amniotic fluid. And that is the worry, that maybe because it's there for so long in the amniotic fluid, some of it may actually dechelate and again deposit somewhere in the on the fetus and cause harm to the fetus. So it is a category C drug, meaning in animal studies there is some toxicity. We haven't seen any toxicity, or not much data on humans, but we should use it with extreme caution, is what everyone says, right? So there should be overwhelming potential benefit to the patient or the fetus if you want to give contrast. So we should try and avoid giving contrast in all situations, but again, it's not a contraindication. So the patient has brain tumor, what do? You need to treat the mother. If there's no mother, there is no baby, right? So there are situations where there's overwhelming potential benefit, and then you do give contrast. Okay. What are the worries? So as I said, it can dechelate, and some studies have said that, especially if contrast is given in the first trimester, there's a higher risk of, skin conditions, rheumatological conditions in the babies, but mainly in the first trimester. But all of these studies again used all contrast agents, and now we know that the more stable is the macrocyclic. So whenever you actually need to give contrast to a pregnant lady, you must use only the macrocyclics, right? Because this we said multi-ants you can use in others because liver mein excrete ho jayega. But when it's in the amniotic fluid, it's not going to be excreted in the liver anyway, right? So for pregnant ladies, only the macrocyclics. Okay, so avoid giving it, but if there's no option, then give the macrocyclics, and that should be safe. Right. So again, here in this case, a patient with brain tumor and pregnant, yes, benefit outweighs the risk, but use a macrocyclic agent. Okay, and of course, you will discuss all of this with the patient and the referring physician. Lactation, really, there's no risk, right? So, we all often even give a contrast directly to a 1-month-old baby, right? So what's the harm in giving it to a mother? So less than 1% of what we inject into the mother goes into the breast milk, right? And even less than 1% of that gets absorbed. So if you give 10 cc of contrast, 0.1 cc is what will go into the baby's gut, or even less than that. So it's very safe, right? We really don't need to worry about it. So we can certainly give contrast in in lactating mothers. There are just 2 things. Again, the caveat. So American College says ki give any agent you want. The European guidelines say give macrocyclics. So I would say prefer giving macrocyclics to lactating mothers. but also tell them that the taste of the milk might get altered a little bit because of the contrast. So that is the only sort of thing, that the baby might find a different taste in the milk. So some people might want to express the milk and bottle feed the baby. But really, as far as any risk is concerned, there is no risk to the baby. Okay. And I think that's pretty much about it. So I thought I'll end with a photo. I'd gone to Kashmir last week, and this is a photo of the beautiful valley. So I thought I'll end with something, more open. Okay. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Akshay, for the wonderful lecture and highlighting the importance of this topic, which we usually forget in our day-to-day practice. So we move on to the question and answer session now. And we have Dr. Amit Chaudhary on the dais, please. Any questions from the audience for both the speakers? I would request the audience to be more interactive. This is a golden opportunity to ask questions and get the answers, direct answers from the speakers.
So we have one question from Durgesh Kumar Yadav in Ludhiana. Can we do an MR scan even if the patient has a prosthetic valve in 3 Tesla MRI machine?
So that will get answered in the future session. So let's wait for the talks which are going to happen in session 2, and that will get answered there.
Yeah, there's one question here. Can you pass the mic, please?
I request Dr. S.N. Singh, our other chairperson, if he has any comments to make. He's online with us here.
Thank you. Actually, it was an informative lecture. I mean, both the speakers have covered technical as well as the practical aspect of the whole thing, and it definitely will benefit us. So I think we can, with the entire crowd, can give them a big round of applause. And, with this, if we don't have any questions, then we can move to the next session. Thank you.
We have 2 questions for the speakers here as well. The first question is to Dr. Chaudhary. What is SED, and can you elaborate to the audience regarding its importance?
Thank you for that query. SED is nothing but specific energy dose. This is not a rate, unlike SAR. This is a product of SAR and time. So this is a newer metric which has been introduced. And this metric can be better compared to SAR, because SAR measures the amount of energy deposition over a short duration of time, that is 15 minutes, and then the limits are prescribed. However, SED can still have doses or energy deposition. Say, for example, the scan extends for too long a time, and then the SED limits are exceeded, then one can stop the scan in such a scenario, maybe give a break and take the patient back for the scan to reduce the amount of energy deposited and resulting ill effects like radiofrequency burns, etc.
Thank you, Dr. Amit. I have one question for Dr. Akshay. Which MR contrast should be used in infant less than 2 years, and what is the rationale for the same? If you can.
Yeah, so the main issue is that most studies, when they look at MR safety, just exclude infants, right? The same thing we are seeing for COVID vaccines, right? Bachcho ko hata do, because they are the most vulnerable. So all the data we have is for adults and then the adolescents, and most data is not there for less than 2 years. But again, the short answer is macrocyclics. Okay, so macrocyclics are the safest, and just use them safe. There's no worry in using them.
Excuse me, sir.
With that, I would like. Oh, there's a question.
Sir, I have just 2 practical questions I encountered recently. Sir, I'll just combine them. One is that after a cardiology procedure, say a coronary stenting or a wall replacement, is there a time after which an MR should be considered safe regarding the epithelialization of the implant? And
so that will get answered again in the next session. Yeah, so that will get covered in the next session. The 3 talks specifically for covering all of this.
Okay. Can you pass the mic, please?
I have one question for Dr. Amit Chaudhary, sir. Can a patient, if a patient is having a high fever, can he undergo MR study?
Yes, the patient can undergo MR study. You have to monitor the SAR levels. So as seen in the talk earlier, we have a prescribed operating limit of 2 watt per kg of SAR for the normal operating mode. This operating mode is clinically ideal for any scenario, be it a febrile patient, patient with cardiovascular compromise, or impaired thermoregulatory capacity. MRI can be done in the normal operating mode, which is usually the mode which is utilized for most or all of the clinical scenarios.